What if the universe isn't ignoring your requests at all, but is instead responding to a hidden signal you don't even realize you're sending? There is a belief, widely spread among those who seek transformation, that says, the more you believe, the more you insist, the more you strive with faith and determination, the more the universe will answer your prayers. It sounds logical, it feels fair. But there is a behavior that does exactly the opposite. It causes reality to stop responding to you. Not because the universe is cruel or indifferent, but because something in the way you relate to what you desire creates a cycle that endlessly repeats itself. This video is not about guilt. It is not about saying that you are doing something wrong on purpose. It is about revealing a pattern that often goes unnoticed, yet lives within thousands of people who spend their lives trying to change without ever leaving the same emotional place. If you are here, you have probably already tried to change. Perhaps many times. You sought spirituality. You read books. You watched videos. You repeated affirmations. You set goals. You made firm decisions. You may have changed cities, jobs, relationships, even entire social circles. And yet, when you pause and look with real honesty, you notice something strange. Your inner experience remains almost the same. The scenery changes, the people change, the goals change, but the emotional flavor of your life remains. You can be in another country, living a completely different routine, and still feel the same dissatisfaction, the same constant effort, the same sense of being almost there but never arriving. You are not alone in this. Millions of people live this reality. They chase new beginnings, new opportunities, new relationships, yet carry the same inner state wherever they go. And it is this inner state that the universe responds to, not your plans, not your words. Here is the point that changes everything. The problem is not what you want. It is not the goal, the dream, or the vision. The problem is the inner state from which you want it. The universe does not respond to words. It does not respond to the promises you make to yourself. The universe responds to inner coherence. It responds to who you truly are at the deepest level, not to who you say you want to become. You can ask for something different. You can insist. You can grow frustrated. But if, inside, you remain in the same place, the result doesn't change. It is like trying to live something new, while always starting from the same point. You change the words. You change the plans. You change the promises. Yet the place from which everything is born remains unchanged. As long as that inner point does not shift, life will keep answering you with different versions of the same story. Joe Dispenza, one of the most well-known researchers in the relationship between mind and body, explains something fundamental. The body can be in the present while the mind continues living in the emotional past. Through his research, he shows that people memorize emotions. They live through difficult, painful, frustrating experiences. And the body stores those emotions as if they were part of identity itself. So even when life changes on the outside, the body continues producing the same chemicals, the same reactions, the same emotional responses. Eckhart Tolle offers a complementary perspective. He teaches that the ego, what he calls the psychological self, repeats itself. Even when the story of your life changes, the inner pattern of the ego remains. You can change partners and still relive the same relational conflicts. You can change jobs and still feel the same professional dissatisfaction. You can move to another place and still carry the same sense of not belonging. These two voices, each in their own way, are pointing to the same truth. There is an inner structure that remains stable while outer life changes. And it is this inner structure that determines what you attract, what you experience, and what repeats in your life. Let's speak in a simple way about something complex that happens inside you. The human brain is a machine of prediction. It does not live in the pure present. It is constantly trying to anticipate what comes next, based on what has already happened before. This is how you are able to drive a car, cook a meal, or hold a conversation. The brain uses the past to predict the future. But there is a problem with this system when it comes to real change. The brain predicts the future based on the emotional experiences you have already lived. If you spent years feeling rejected, the brain will anticipate rejection in your next encounters. If you spent years feeling scarcity, the brain will expect scarcity in the next opportunity. If you spent years feeling that you must prove your worth, the brain will keep organizing situations in which you feel compelled to prove yourself. This happens at the level of the nervous system. The body seeks what is familiar. Even when the familiar is uncomfortable, painful, or limiting, it is still familiar. And what is familiar feels safer to the nervous system than the unknown. So something subtle and powerful happens. You try to create something new from the same inner place. You want a different relationship, but from the same feeling of loneliness. You want financial abundance, but from the same feeling of lack. You want peace, but from the same feeling of anxiety. It is like trying to reach a different destination while always leaving from the same starting point and following the same internal map. You can accelerate, you can take new roads, you can even fly instead of drive. But if the point of departure is the same and the inner map is the same, you will arrive at some variation of the same place. Reality changes when the starting point changes. If the inner point remains the same, the world simply reorganizes itself around the same pattern. Faces change, names change, places change, but the essential experience remains. This is where many people become confused. They think, "But I am trying so hard. I am doing everything right. Why isn't it working?" Effort, by itself, does not change the inner point of departure. In fact, sometimes effort strengthens the old pattern. Because you may be striving from a feeling of insufficiency. You may be working hard to prove that you are capable, yet the very act of trying to prove it arises from a belief that you are not. In this way, you confirm the belief while trying to escape it. It is like being in quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. Not because movement is wrong, but because the kind of movement you are making is not appropriate for where you are. Many people live in a constant state of compensation. They try to compensate for something they feel is missing inside with outer achievements. They try to compensate for an inner emptiness with relationships, money, approval, success. But compensation never truly works because it begins with the assumption that something is lacking. And when you act from the belief that something is missing, you generate more experiences of absence. It is not because you are undeserving. It is not because the universe is working against you. It is because the inner belief is creating a magnetic field that attracts situations that confirm itself. Think of someone who deeply believes that others will abandon them. That person may meet the most loyal partner in the world, yet interpret every silence, every moment of distraction, every need for personal space as a sign of impending abandonment. Interpreting life through that lens, they begin to act in ways that create tension. The tension grows, the relationship strains, and sometimes it ends. When it does, the person thinks, See, I knew it. I always get abandoned. What they do not see is that their own belief quietly orchestrated the outcome. This is not about blame. It is simply how the system functions. The inner system seeks confirmation. It wants to be right. It wants to prove that its view of the world is correct, even when that view is painful. There is a sensitive point that is rarely spoken about, something that needs to be said, yet is almost never said in spiritual circles. Sometimes, when a person loses momentum, when they stop trying, when they enter a season of silence or apparent stagnation, it is not failure. It may be the inner system refusing to repeat the same cycle once again. There is wisdom in exhaustion. There is intelligence in the pause. When you can no longer force yourself forward, when you can no longer fake enthusiasm, when you can no longer repeat the same affirmations without feeling their hollowness. Perhaps this is not weakness. Perhaps it is the beginning of a deeper honesty. Many people interpret these moments as depression, as loss of faith, as giving up, and sometimes that is exactly what they are. But at other times, it is the inner system whispering, "I can't keep doing this in the same way. Something else is required. Something must change." The problem is that we were taught to push through these moments, to keep your vibration high, to not allow negative thoughts, to just keep believing. All of this can have value in certain contexts, but it can also become a form of inner stubbornness, a way of forcing the system to remain in a pattern that no longer works. There is a difference between persistence and stubbornness. Persistence arises from clarity and alignment. Stubbornness arises from fear and compulsion. And very often, what we call not giving up is simply stubbornness wearing a spiritual mask. So if effort does not work, if insistence does not work, if affirmations do not work, what does? Real change happens when there is an interruption in the inner pattern. Not a forced change, not a manufactured transformation, but a moment of true perception. A moment in which you see the pattern operating, and something inside you simply stops feeding it. This doesn't happen through more effort. It happens through a different quality of attention. An attention that observes without judging. An attention that perceives without immediately trying to fix. When you are able to observe the pattern without fully identifying with it, something begins to shift, because observation creates space, and in that space, the real possibility of change appears. Think of it this way. While you are completely immersed in the pattern, you are the pattern. When you are able to observe the pattern, even for a few seconds, you are no longer only the pattern. You also become the one who is watching. And the one who watches has a different quality than what is being watched. This is the opening through which something new can emerge. Not because you are forcing the new, but because by creating space, you allow the deeper intelligence of life to move in a different way. Repetition is not the enemy. The problem is not routine. It is not doing the same things every day. The problem arises when repetition happens at the level of inner experience, without awareness, without choice, without the possibility of being different. You can live the same external routine and have completely different inner experiences, depending on the state from which you are living. And you can live completely different routines while carrying the exact same inner experience. The harmful repetition is the one that lives at the level of emotional identity. It is when you feel like the same person, living the same inner story, no matter how much the outside world changes. And here is something crucial. This repetition does not end when you understand it intellectually. You can understand everything that is happening and still keep repeating it. Because the pattern does not live in the intellect. It lives in the body. It lives in the nervous system. It lives in the emotional structure that has been built over years. Repetition ends when you stop sustaining it. And you do not stop sustaining it through force. You stop sustaining it through a different quality of presence, a presence that is not trying to get rid of anything, not trying to fix anything, not trying to force transformation, a presence that is simply here with what is, without feeding the drama around it. Many people say the universe is not responding. They say they ask and ask and ask, and nothing happens. But perhaps the issue is not that the universe is silent. Perhaps it is responding constantly, just not to the signal you think you are sending, but to the signal you are actually emitting. So when it feels like nothing is changing, when it feels like you are being ignored, a different question can be asked. Not, why isn't the universe listening to me? But, what signal am I truly sending? And to know what signal you are sending, you must look at the results. Because the life you are living now is the result of the signal you have been emitting. Not in a punitive way, but in a mirrored way. External reality reflects internal reality. If rejection keeps appearing in your life, there is something in you that expects it, prepares for it, and may even provoke it unconsciously because it is familiar. If scarcity keeps repeating, there is something in you that is tuned to the frequency of scarcity. And again, this is not blame. It is simply how the system works. And once you understand how the system works, you can begin to work with it instead of against it. You may be asking yourself now, all right, I understand this, but what do I do with it? And here is something important to hear. There is no magic technique. There is no 5-step method. Because if there were, you would simply be trying to change through the very same mental pattern, seeking an external solution to fix an internal state. Real change begins with honesty. Honesty about what you truly feel, not about what you think you should feel. Honesty about where you truly are, not about where you think you should be. Because as long as you pretend to feel something you do not feel, as long as you pretend to be in a place where you are not, you keep feeding an inner division. And it is this inner division that creates suffering and repetition. So perhaps the first step is simply this. I am here. This is how I feel. This is what is present now. Without trying to change it immediately, without trying to correct it, without placing a positive affirmation on top of it. Just recognizing what is true right now. This may seem too simple. It may feel like it leads nowhere. But this quality of honesty with yourself creates something that no technique can create. It creates inner integrity. And it is from inner integrity that real change is born. There comes a moment in every journey of genuine transformation when something breaks. Not necessarily in a dramatic way, but in a decisive one. It is the moment when you simply can no longer act in the old way, not because you are forcing yourself to stop, but because something fundamental has shifted. You may still feel the old emotions arise. You may still notice the old patterns of thought, but there is now a different quality in your relationship with them. They no longer grip you in the same way. They no longer define you in the same way. And when this happens, external reality begins to reorganize itself. Not because you are manipulating life, but because the inner signal has changed. And when the signal changes, the response changes. This does not mean everything becomes perfect. It does not mean challenges disappear. It means you meet life from a different inner place. And that changes everything. The universe is not silent. It is simply waiting for a signal that does not yet exist. A signal that does not come from effort, that does not come from trying to be different, that does not come from forcing yourself to become someone else. It comes from a quality of being that is simply true. And perhaps this truth does not need to be constructed. Perhaps it only needs to be uncovered beneath all the layers of conditioning, of striving, of trying to become who you think you should be. Repetition does not end when you understand it. It ends when you stop sustaining it. And you stop sustaining it when something truer is allowed to emerge. Not because you forced that space open, but because you finally stopped closing it. This video is not meant to give you definitive answers. It is meant to open questions, to invite you to look at what is operating inside you with a level of honesty you may not have allowed before. Because in the end, the change you are seeking may not be where you have been looking. It may be in the place where you stopped looking, in the place where you simply are, without trying to be more, without trying to be different, without trying to prove anything. And from that place, something new can be born, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped preventing it. The change you seek is not a destination to be reached through effort. It is a frequency to be tuned into through awareness. And if you feel that it is time to stop repeating the same story and begin walking a path of real alignment, I invite you to take the next step with us. Subscribe to the channel Quantum Path Awakening. Here, we explore the keys to awakening your true essence and transforming the signal you send into the universe. The path into the new begins now.